Hello, I'm Mr. Opp, and welcome to Unit 2, Security Programs. So for our overview, we're going to discuss DoD and government-specific programs as it relates to cybersecurity and specifically information security. So for an overview, we are going to discuss InfoSec, which is information security. And we're going to move on to CompuSec, which is computer security. Then on to Tempest, which deals with unintended transmissions. Then ComSec, communication security, dealing with intended transmissions. And finally, OPSEC, operational security. So again, these are Air Force and DoD specific programs that deal with different aspects of information security. So for our first objective, we're going to discuss basic facts and terms pertaining to InfoSec, information security. Here we're looking at the different classifications of information, specifically through the filter of national security. So information protection. For cybersecurity, all information we want protected in some way, shape, or form. So information protection is organizations and infrastructures, the measures they take to protect and safeguard Air Force personnel, information operations, resources, technologies, facilities, against any potential harm, loss, or hostile acts and influences. Within information protection, we have three core security disciplines. The first one is personnel security. We use this one to determine whether military, civilian, or contractors have the eligibility and requirements that they need to access classified information. Then we move on to industrial security, because the government doesn't produce a lot. We work with partners in corporations. They create stuff for us. We have to exchange requirements. Some of that might be at a classified level. So industrial security is what we use to protect and control unclassified information that's going to be released to those contractors and partners. And finally, we're going to look at information security, or InfoSec. And this is an overall program, a subset of this information program, information protection, that protects and deals with classified as well as what we refer to as controlled unclassified information, or CUI. So as I mentioned, one of those three core security disciplines is InfoSec, information security. Again, this is a core security discipline within information protection that's designed to identify and protect classified national security information and also controlled unclassified information in accordance with DoD policy. Now, there exists what's called the Freedom of Information Act. Freedom of Information Act provides the public the right to request records from federal agencies. Federal agencies are required to disclose information requested through FOIA unless it falls under one of 9 exemptions. There's a couple of examples here on the board. Personal privacy, PII information as it relates to you as an individual, national security for obvious reasons, and also law enforcement. Those are a few examples of the 9 exemptions. Now, as I mentioned, we're dealing with information in regards to national security. So when we talk about that, we have to designate it as something. We have to identify it. So information designations are various levels of designation that, for official information, that require varying degrees of protection. And with those varying degrees of protection, also has varying requirements for releasing to the public. So these are not all the classifications that exist. These are just broad terms in which we can think of things. So the first one we're going to look at is what's called controlled unclassified information. Just because it's unclassified doesn't mean it needs no protection at all. So and especially in some cases, just because it's unclassified, we do require additional protections. One area we're going to look at specifically under CUI is what's called FOEU, for official use only. As the term states, this is for official use during your duties as an Air Force member. One of the subsets of for official use only is Privacy Act information, protecting the information of individuals that we work with. The second category we're going to look at is classified information. This is what you would typically think of as secret, top secret. Again, broad categories as it relates to the designation of information. So the first one, as we've discussed, is controlled unclassified information. The Air Force does annual training on this, so you may have already had training as it relates to CUI. If not, you surely will be. But there are certain types of unclassified information that require access and distribution controls. Certain parts of your duties may require you to gather information that could be considered something like PII. So if you were to store that somewhere on a network drive or a shared device, you want to make sure that it's protected from people that do not have the authorization to see that information. So information such as FOU, things like that, are collectively termed CUI, Controlled Unclassified Information. So there's more information on how does something get classified as CUI. That's based off the DoD Manual 5200.01, Volume 4. So again, for official use only, DoD dissemination and control under the category of CUI. So, for example, all for official use only information is controlled unclassified information, but it doesn't work technically the other way. Not all CUI is FOUO. FOUO is a specific category of controlled unclassified information. FOUO is exempt from mandatory release under the Freedom of Information Act because it falls under one or more of the 9 FOIA exemptions that we mentioned earlier. But if it's identified as for official use only, reasonable steps must be taken to minimize the risk of access by unauthorized personnel. It should be stored in containers and should not be discussed in proximity to unauthorized personnel. As I mentioned, a subset of FOUO information is something we refer to as Privacy Act information. Privacy Act information is based on anything that was identified in the Privacy Act of 1974, and it's also defined in AFI 33 TAC 332. With that stuff, we are prescribed to manage personal information stored within official records. And this is also known as PII. So this is information that I can use to identify you as an individual. So certain things that would fall under, but not an all-inclusive list, would be something like your social security number. That identifies you as an individual. Your age, your address, your telephone number, things like that are directly attributed to you as an individual. So Privacy Act information falls under FOU protections as well, which means we have to shield it from mandatory FOI release due to privacy concerns. As we mentioned, there's safeguards should be taken. So if you're dealing and you have to print out information, you might have to print out an appointment letter, and it might require signatures, and it has PII information on it. If you're transporting it, moving it around, storing it, bare minimum, you should have a cover sheet. This is an example of a cover sheet that we would use for a document that contains PII. So that was CUI, Controlled Unclassified Information. We're moving on to the next category, which is classified information. Classified information has been determined to require protection against unauthorized disclosure in the interest of national defense. So disclosure of classified material could cause damage to national security. Classification levels of information are based upon the amount of damage it could do if it was released to unauthorized persons. The 3 broad terms that we use to classify information from least restricted to the most: confidential, secret, and then top secret. Again, these are just broad categories. There are other things that go along with it. So for example, classification of top secret, that is our highest level of information, so therefore it requires the highest degree of protection. If information that's classified as top secret were to be leaked or to get out, the damage to national security could be exceptionally grave. The next level down, we have secret. This requires a substantial level of protection, and if released to gets out and released to people that do not have access to, should not have access to it, we now have a serious level of damage to national security. The way you can think about it is if it's something that's top secret gets leaked, exceptionally grave, people could die. If it's at the secret level, it gets out, there's going to be some serious damage. They both actually start with SE, so easy way to remember. Secret, serious, top secret, people will die. And then finally, we have confidential. This requires a lesser degree of protection, but it still requires some protection. And damage to national security, there could be some. It could increase, but for most likely, this is just confidential information, close hold. An example of that would be ship movement, or maybe the president visiting a base, whatever the itinerary is. That would be something as an example of confidential information. The people that are involved in the planning need to know, and nobody else does. So in dealing with any of these levels of information, there's different ways that we can transport or transmit it. If it's top secret, we are required to use a top secret level cryptographic system. If we're going to transport it, it can be transported by cleared and designated U.S. military personnel or Department of State couriers. If it's classified at the secret level, I can use any of the means that we utilize in top secret. I can go up. I can use stuff at secret level. I can transmit it, transport it using the same methods at top secret. If it's good for top secret, it's good enough for secret. It does not work the other way. I cannot take top secret information and send it through U.S. Postal Service. Not allowed. But secret, I can use any of the top secret means in addition to USPS registered mail within the United States. And finally, we have confidential. Same rules apply. I can go up. Anything that's utilized for the top secret or secret means I can utilize for confidential. Confidential, I can also utilize United States Postal Service registered mail to DoD contractors and non-DoD federal agencies. And I can also use U.S. Postal Service first class mail to Department of Defense within the United States. Similar to PII, when I'm dealing with printing and transporting, bare minimum, I should be utilizing cover sheets to identify that the documents contained below are classified at some level and to essentially leave it alone. But if you see a document like this unattended, there may be concerns and you may be required to take action. That concludes information security. We will move on to the next unit,